day, Patrick Johnston. Welcome to Canucks This Week, where we will talk about everything happening in Canucks world. Now the season is pretty much well underway. We'll start by thanking Paragon Roofing. Visit paragonroofingbc.ca for all your roofing needs, installation, repairs, commercial, residential, more than 20 years in business, proud sponsors of the Canucks, big Canucks fans. We really appreciate their support for this. So thank you to them. Patrick, let's talk Canucks. I don't know sometimes if I put too much stock on, comments on your stories or stuff we see in social media, but this team's 500, which, considering the starts they've had the last couple of years, is not a bad place to be. And okay, great. They had opening night and then they go on this long road trip. Should people be upset with this start for the Canucks? Why are they upset with the Canucks? Are you upset with the Canucks? Like, it just seems weird. Like I know some of the performances haven't been great, but they're 2-2. Like, compared to the past years, I would take that
Elias
heartbeat.
Elias Pettersson's leading the league in scoring. Like there's Thatcher Demko's playing really well. Now he's probably playing really well in a way that you'd rather not. I think it's anxiety. I think it's just 10 years of mostly chaos. What is it? Once shy, twice bitten. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Once bitten, twice shy.
Or once bitten, twice shy. It's like that. It's
fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. That's the same thing. Same concept.
You look back at, and I can't remember what it was. Like the last time they started 3-0 was 2016, and if you remember 2016, I mean that's Willie Desjardins' third season, and that was a season that went south quite quickly. And that's the Sea of Granlunds. That was everyone thought he was going to get fired. Desjardins was going to get fired. Nothing happened. Just plodded along. It was such a miserable. That was really a miserable season. That team couldn't score. That was. I think everyone knew that was a mirage. We're kind of on the flip side of that, which is that people don't want last week to have been a mirage. Like they knew 8-1 over the Oilers was never going to happen again. The way, but the Canucks played really well. The point was they played really well, and there were bits in Saturday. Obviously, Saturday's win. I mean, you go to Edmonton, you knew the Oilers were going to come extra motivated. Connor McDavid is an outstanding player. That they stole a win there was, I think, to their credit. And then we get to Butt, right? You look at Tuesday when they lost badly to Philly. Coach ripped them. Last night in Tampa, probably deserved better, but crucial mistakes. And Rick Tocchet highlighted the fact that at the end of the day, it is about crucial mistakes. He said we're probably about 5. 2 of them we know about, which was one of them was the Myers clearing disaster, the bad read on the boards where he ends up taking Pettersson and then ends up being a 3-on-1 down low. But he also, Tocchet also highlighted the details thing, which he says, these are why we do these things. And he mentioned, casually, I think he was referring to the Esamont second goal, the tying goal, which happens because Connor Garland misreads what he's supposed to do in the neutral zone and creates this wide open lane. And mistakes are going to happen, and this is what Tocchet said. Mistakes are going to happen. He acknowledges this. You just simply don't want to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over. And that's kind of where they're at. That the team itself knows that it's it's a long season. You're right. They're 2-2, right? Like they go into Florida. Florida is dealing with some injuries. They're going to be tired after last season, short off season. But Matthew Tkachuk and Sasha Barkov haven't scored a goal yet, so they're going to score. Are they going to score on Saturday? This is why none of these games are easy, and so for fans, it's just that anxiety of what's this team going to be? Are they going to win another road game? Because they've won one. And you ask me this every week, but asked me last week, I said, well, they've got one of their wins. You said, what's going to happen in the next 3 games? Well, they got one of the wins. They would like to have had 2. And you look at how they played in Tampa, and isn't that they deserved to win, but a win would not have been an unfair result but they had a terrible second period, and that kind of settled everything.
You know, one of the reasons I chuckled in the middle of there, you said, like, you know, don't repeat your mistakes. And I'm thinking there, as you were going through your answer, that you talked about like once bitten, twice shy. It's really like 11
Yeah,
times bitten
yeah.
for since 2011, right? Like,
Like, don't make a mistake existentially, right? Like, but
yeah,
and that's Canucks fans, right? They want
but
to believe and they want
no, of
hope and
course.
want, and in the end,
But
they're
you,
just like, I've screwed up before, this has gone badly before, and here we go again.
I think you always settle into a period of, like, again, it is here we go again, and it's like you're
Right.
comfortable being negative and making like self-deprecating jokes about being a Canuck fan. Like I remember going with my friends to games in the mid 80s when the team was terrible.
Oh,
The promise of 82 crash in a hurry, and you'd be sitting in the stands. Like, first of all, you know, my dad get tickets through work because he couldn't give them away to clients. Clients turned them down. So you go and
yeah,
there were 11,000 people in the Coliseum,
yeah,
and the
yeah,
people sitting around you were all making cracks about the team. Like, oh,
yeah.
nice pass, Snepsy, when it goes, you know, right onto the tape of an opposition player. Funnily enough, around that era, I remember Jim Benning playing, and the seats that my dad had, the people guy behind him would ride Benning all the time for just being a terrible player. But my point is, like, I think it's very easy as a fan, as a defense mechanism, to criticize and make
Yeah,
fun of.
absolutely.
I, I wanted to ask you something about this though, like the equivalent in hockey parlance of calling Marty McFly a chicken is calling someone soft.
Right.
And to my recollection, this is the second time Tocchett's done it. After the Philly game, you know, said, I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it. I mean, obviously calculated to get that message across. He said, there's some guys here who have really got to pick it up. Like, in your analysis, like, who do you think he's referring to? Like, we know this team's upper echelon and where they are, and we know he's trying to get more out of sort of beyond that top 4 or 5 players, you know, right? And plus, I'd throw Demko in that mix. But for that, the next group of guys, like, is he serious here that guys should be playing for their jobs, or is this just something like, okay, this is what I have, this is what I have to work with. I got to try and get the cattle prod out.
I there's an element of getting people. I don't know if getting people on board is the right way to put it, because it suggests that it's not a united group. I think it's a pretty coherent group. There are obviously warts. I mean, we know it's not a perfectly constructed roster. The management has acknowledged that there's some cap problems. I mean, it is not. It should be no shock to anyone that they've been, you know, that the Tyler Myers' name has legitimately been out there. Now, I'm not sure you can trade him right now. I'm not sure you can trade him this season. But certainly, there have been efforts to move him in the past. Um, and Connor Garland obviously is openly out there. Um, you know, a player who I've said before, certainly been amenable to a trade in the past. Um, I get the sense that, you know, I mean, it's all being reported, and so I'm not saying anything new here, but yeah, this is something that the team itself is pursuing. Um, Garland was not named by Tocchet on Thursday night, but he identified a mistake that was made by Connor Garland. He was pretty open about Myers when he was asked by the reporters that are in Tampa that they need more, basically saying they need more from Myers right now. Like, he's a guy that has experience, he's long experience. Um, you know, Carson Soucy just getting back in the lineup, Mark Friedman being a new player. You know, they've been leaning on Myers. They need more from Myers. And Myers is playing more than he has. I went back and reread the column I wrote 4 years ago, right before they signed him, the one that got me a call from Jim Benning about, well, basically, you understand what we're trying to get here. And I said, yeah, but this is my job. At that point, Tyler Myers was a player who could still move the puck, was not a, defensive shutdown defenseman, but they kind of signed him to be a defensive shutdown guy. And he was never that guy. It was a classic Benning move to sign a guy to be something that they aren't. And I think Myers on the whole has been fine up until really sort of the tail end of last season, and then this season, where I think time is catching up to him.
Salary
But
cap era, though, you're always going to get beaten with the
you're
stick to your
stuck. Yeah,
salary, whether
exactly.
it's
And
fair
so
or not.
here it is. And here, yeah, exactly. And so this comes back to the original question, which is, Tocchet is looking for more from certain guys. And I think certainly Myers is one of those guys. Whether it's not even to play up his salary, it's just they need him to fill a role. They need him to do to be reliable, not make the same mistakes. And that's certainly someone they're looking at. Philip Hronek, I think, has had some struggles adapting to sort of his new team. I don't think he's actually the right partner for Quinn Hughes. I think they both, Hronek's a guy who wants the puck, and Hughes is going to have the puck when you're playing with him. And so, Hronek, I feel like is trying to force stuff almost. I think I think that's a pairing. You have to find a way to split them up. Whether that means you give more ice time to Tyler Myers, I don't know, but you don't have many options right now. Noel Juleson was not up to snuff. Maybe we are going to see Cole McWard come back. Cole McWard, I think, still needs a lot of work to become a regular NHL defenseman. He showed enough in preseason to say that he's close, but I think to do him right, you keep him in the AHL, you let him adjust to sort of the expectations of this level. But yeah, Philip Hronek, being a player that they brought in with some fanfare, they need more. Anthony Beauvillier, like he was okay. He's okay, but like. They brought him in to score some
the fans
goals.
want more than okay.
I know.
Patrick, that's the whole thing.
That's what I mean.
So let me ask you this.
Andrei Kuzmenko has one goal. Like,
I know.
Yeah, there's definitely guys like, and on the whole, and this is something I've noted in my Canucks numbers story this week, the Canucks have scored on 42% of their high danger chances, but they're not creating a lot of high danger chances, and nobody scores on 42% of their high danger chances. You can't draw a lot of conclusions other than to say they are not going to continue to score that many goals in tight. And that's going to be a problem. Like,
okay,
they need to go forward. They need to create more in tight, and that's on everybody.
You're getting to the crux of exactly what I wanted to ask you about, and that's, and it's so funny that you just brought up those stats, because I see it everywhere: fancy stats versus the eye test, right? And I think a smart person can take both. They both have value. So you can play quite poorly and win 3 out of 4. Hockey's a game which has a ton of randomness to it.
Yes.
You can play very well and lose 3 out of 4. I mean, that's going to happen. But a lot of these, the trend is what you'll see over the course of the season. If you're playing well, bounces will go against you, calls will go against you, but ultimately you're a better team. Is this what you're saying? Is that when you go, okay, like, is this team needs to get beyond okay? This team needs to be playing where, when the coach says afterwards, I thought we deserved more out of that, right? And so, are you concerned just seeing the level of play? It's very clear that 8-1 you talked about, you're right. We all knew it was an anomaly at the time, but there was such emphasis on starting well, coming out of training camp, and that was such a great night. I am a little surprised to see the performances be like crash and then maybe get back to flat. So I am a little curious as to really where this real team lies. How do you see that?
Well, I think you're exactly that. We're in that window now, right? Like, the game against Florida is going to be a tough one. It's not. This is a long, meandering road trip. There's a lot. They're still not home for another week, really. But you could, like I said, you can start to see some trends. They've had a lot of good stuff. The fact they haven't been completely overrun every night defensively in their own end has been good. But that Philly game was not good. And it's against these teams that are the true measuring stick. Edmonton obviously is off to a really poor start, but Edmonton is supposed to be a Stanley Cup contender. Tampa Bay have been a finalist, have won 2 Stanley Cups in recent memory, been a finalist, multiple other times. Like, that is one of the best teams in the NHL going. Florida were in the final and deserved to be there last year. Like, they've got a lot of things going. These are teams that matter. This is not a road trip against the Arizona Coyotes. Or rebuilding Anaheim Ducks or San Jose Sharks. Like, these are the teams that are the true measuring sticks, and early on. And I think at best right now the report card says incomplete. Like, we need to see more. I'm not like I said, the thing that more than anything that now I think the question is, can they create enough offense? Like, even if they really do kind of steady the ship defensively, which obviously Thursday night had that terrible second period and they lost their way a little bit. They played pretty well in the third period. Like, they played pretty well in the first period. They had an early lead in the second period that they deserved to have, and they really, instead of bending under the pressure, they broke, right? Like, that's the classic coach's saying, right? We bend, don't break. And they broke. And they came out of the period trailing. And it was not unreasonable for them to be trailing after the second period. So you look at how they played in the third, the fact that they kind of stuck with it. They did get a goal. Okay, is that something that is that the team? Is that the team that the way they play? Because they're in that process window. We need to see more of the process, and the process has really been hit and miss so far. 4 games is not the whole season, right? Like there's a lot. We can't really start casting judgments till game 10 or 20 even. But you can see some things to start questions that you need to start seeing some answers to, and I think we have that already.
Yeah, I will add. I think Florida. You're right, tough opponent. They really took off once they changed their media relations department. It's really been a big boost to them. Shall we look at the next 4 games then? They've got Florida and Nashville on the road. I mean, I know there's travel in here, but they got 2 days between games, and then they return for St. Louis and the Rangers next Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is tough back to back coming off a road trip. But out of those 4 games, what do you expect?
Well, yeah, I mean, I actually realized you look at the way Florida's kind of lining up on this, and they are a little bit, like I said, they're coming off a short off season. They're dealing with a couple of key injuries. Brandon Montour's out. Aaron Ekblad's still out. They're both going to be out for a while. Matt Tkachuk and Sasha Barkov, who are 2 of the game's true greats. Is it that they're just kind of warming up to their season? They're just kind of like they're starting to stretch out their legs a little bit. Like they know it's gonna be a long grind if they're going to try to win the Stanley Cup this year. There's sort of a team. One team is the Canucks who are coming in to prove something, and then another team that's sort of like they're kind of getting the engine started. It's so I think from that standpoint, to me, it sets up well for a Canucks win. They played really well. One of Bruce Boudreau's last games was in Florida, and the Canucks played pretty well. Couldn't get a win, but they played pretty well. And there's something about they've had. I mean, I think there's 2-3 times I've covered games there. A couple of them have been terrible, but they've had good ones as well. And so I do think this is a game that sets itself up to win. The Nashville one. I mean, Nashville. I really don't know what to make of the Coyotes. They've given up 15 goals in 5 games, which, in today's NHL where goals happen a lot, is not terribly standout. But they feel just like a team that, I mean, they're obviously doing a big rebuild there. Barry Trotz is going to reset the ship there. Moved on from a bunch of guys off last season. Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene, it's a team in transition. You look at that, and again, the narrative there for the Canucks is they should win. So to me, they got to win one of those 2 next games. Like it just, not just in terms of must win, but like probably, there's just sort of the sort of energy of it all. They're not playing so badly that they don't have a hope. They're playing well enough that you've got to think they're going to win one of those 2 games. And then they come home, and the Blues can't score. They, as we speak, have 5 goals in 3 games. And they're a bit of a team, trying to figure out what they're going to be next. Obviously, we know Craig Berube is a top-notch coach. He won a Stanley Cup. That wasn't an accident. That's going to be a hard game. Whether it's a high scoring game remains to be seen. And then the Rangers always bring it. Like that's been a team that's been one of the better teams in the last decade. Again, I think out of these next 4 games, the Canucks should see 2 wins. I think if things go well, they get 3 wins. But yeah, I'm calling for 2 wins for the next week. I mean, I know we'll probably talk before the St. Louis game.
Oh, we will. We'll
the overlap call here will be 2 wins in the next 4 games. Sure.
Okay, that's good. I want to finish up by asking you about a piece that you've written and take people behind the curtain a little bit. Obviously, Stan Smyl announced his, that he was stepping back from day-to-day duties with the Canucks.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot going on during that time. And then you said to me earlier this week in one of our, when we have conversations about what you're covering and where we should go, and you said, I'm going to finish the Smyl stuff up. And I was like, let's just wait. Like, let's wait a month. There's been a lot of Smyl stuff. I'm worried that it'll get lost, and let's see. And you were like, no, I've got really good stuff that other people didn't get. And I want to commend you on that. It's a fabulous piece, and people should go read it. One of the things, again, maybe an era thing for me, just how he references his wife Jennifer. Times are different now, probably for the better because of some of the worse elements of our society. But it used to be that Canuck wives had their place almost as
Right.
very visible celebrity style people in Vancouver. And Stan's wife Jennifer was one of the biggest. I also, Trevor's wife Christina, and then there was a bit of a stalking incident there. And ever since then, the wives don't seem as prominent again, unfortunately, for good reason.
Yeah.
But Stan and Jennifer really were like king of queen in Vancouver. You've got a lot of that good stuff in there. A lot of good stuff when he was a rookie. I'm one of those ones who will quibble about how easily the Canucks honor people now.
Right.
It's like, John Van Beesbrook, who they claimed once in an expansion draft for the purposes of protecting their own goalie. I'm surprised they haven't put him in the Ring of Honor. And people, to my mind, with all due respect, people who don't know their history will often downplay Smyl and go, well, why is his number there? He's the most deserving one for me, and I'm a massive Pavel Bure fan. Like, Bure should be retired. But for me, Stan Smyl, I have never seen an athlete represent this city the way that Stan Smyl did, and stick through various regimes, ownerships, general managers, coaches. He's been a constant. And when you couldn't improve your team by a free agency, Stan came into a group that was largely not very good. And it didn't matter. They were getting smacked around weekly, it seemed, by the Oilers. The Messier, Coffee, and the Canucks had no talent. And Smyl be down 6-1. He'd be taking Messier hard into the corner. To me, he, all due respect to people like Trevor Linden and the Sedins, there's no one to me who embodies the Canucks more than Stan Smyl. What's your relationship been like with him, and what did you feel about writing that piece, which, again, people should go read, province.com, vancouversun.com, you can find it.
Yeah, I mean, for better or for worse, represents the Canucks, right? I mean, the era you're talking about, of course, being, so mediocre. As a side note, one of the people I talked to was Chris Tanev, and you look at when he comes in like Smyl helps recruit him. Tanev literally plays games in the Stanley Cup final, as a raw rookie. That's how good this guy was and what a great pickup he was. And then, becomes this Canuck for a decade, obviously leaves because ownership is just being ridiculous in the middle of a pandemic and won't spend any money. But here's a guy that, that did the job, showed up, worked hard. Oddly enough, joined a team that was better than the team that Smyl played on that made the Stanley Cup final, right? Like that 82 team was better than people give it credit for. It was clearly a step below the New York Islanders, but they were a very good team. And even through that terrible decade that followed, that Smyl endured, Smyl still played more playoff games than Chris Tanev, right? Like that's something that just kind of blew my mind thinking about where things are going. Go back to the beginning of what we talked about today, but like that's a side point. Stan Smyl, like I would say, this is my 6th year on the beat. Getting to know him even a little bit has been so special. He's a guy that cares about people. And that came out when I talked to Brock Besser. Like I just thought, here's a guy that Brock is one of the longest standing Canucks. He's been around Stan. I figured he would have something interesting to say. And, he referenced how important Stan's been the last 2 years, as Brock dealt with, his father's decline and then death and supporting him through that. And, Stan, we talked about Jennifer, which is not something he's not talked about her really since she died. And, I went back to listen to the recording of the interview. Stan and I sat in the stands at Rogers, and I just had our, my phone on record between us, and we just had a conversation. And listening back, it was so fun. All these things and relating the opening story that I mentioned about that, but it was, sort of his first training camp, and him sort of smiling but not wanting to, his head doesn't grow in size when you talk about things about his career. He's simply matter of fact. He talked about it. But and I noticed at the time that his voice wavered when I said, "Can we talk about Jen?" He goes, "Yeah, sure." And I asked him, and he thought a lot about what he wanted to say, and he got it out. And it was so painful to listen to, Paul, and all of us who have been fortunate not to deal with loss. I can only look at it, and those who've dealt with loss. I mean, I had someone tweet at me, and I've had another person email me just sort of saying, how much that struck with them, having lost someone to cancer. And you know, and you feel for him, and everyone just goes, man, this man is the best person you've ever met. You know, Jonathan Bates, the former Canucks scout who I talked to for this story, you know, he just absolutely thinks the world of Stan. Stan is the most important friendship he made, I think, in hockey. Um, you know, Stan cares about people. You know, and that was the thing. Tanev said, like, I asked him, you know, what's an example? Is there an example you can give of when you mentioned that Stan had been an advisor or had given you advice or been someone you would turn to for advice? And he just simply mentioned that basically he explained what he was doing. You know, he's leaving, he's going to Calgary, and you know that Stan would have been giving him what he, you know, is trying to give his version of what he sees as happening on the other side of things, and helping Chris to sort of understand why things weren't going to work out the way I think, you know, players really have long loved playing in this town and playing for this team, and obviously it was a difficult period for the team, you know, and so that stood out to me. And you know, in the end, also, it's just John McKeechee completely wanted to hammer home the point, you know, and we know what it's like when John calls you up. The story's gonna be, it's got 18 different moving parts to it, and it's, you know, it's all this wild stuff, but it's how it used to be. And you know, John was so insistent on, you know, these things are important, these things, and it was just absolutely fabulous telling me. I mean, that it wasn't, he's not the only one who's told the story of Smyl basically putting snaps through the end boards and in training camp, but his version was fantastic. You know, it is one of those ones, you hear the story, you tell it to the person involved, and you know, they yep, that's how it happened. Yep, Randy Holt was going to kick the snot out of me, but Snap said, no, we need this, and you know, it was just great. And then, you know, the anecdote of him being on the ice and basically telling off of LA Kings veteran, no one could seem to remember who it was, but yeah, I did say that.
Randy
But
Holt.
let's talk about something else, you know. And like, anyway, it was a very fun piece, and I'm glad I put it together, and you know, I'm glad that people have been able to read and get some insight into someone who has been so important to Canucks history, as I think I tried to capture in the piece, as a captain, as a player. And you're totally right. You know, if you actually, now that I've understand it a little bit better, you know, you look at the names, retirements, whatever, however you want to divide it up. You know, the if you're going to pick one person to actually put up there, it actually is Smyl. I think people would instinctually think it's Linden, but it actually is Smyl because of everything you talked about in terms of what he did when he came in, the way he came in, the way he really kind of reset that team, and then the way he persevered through some really bad times, bad management, bad leadership, all these things, and then transitioned into becoming such a key sort of quiet part of multiple management teams. You know, he gets turned into an assistant coach by Pat Quinn, becomes their main coach in the minors, becomes a development, you know, before teams were even thinking about player development, you know, that was his title. Now, what he was doing then may be different from what you do now, but he was a guy whose job was to keep up on top of the prospects.
Well,
He
and
became
even just
involved in scouting.
Well, even just recently when they made front office changes, who was the guy constant there that what was the fall guy to go out and answer questions when the owner won't do it, right?
It's Smyl. And you know, and that caught me. Brock Besser mentioned it. Like, Besser mentioned it we were talking about, and he goes, and you know, those 3 days or wherever it was, like, he was really important because everything, Besser himself said it was a shit show. You know, like, the team was playing badly. Everything, there was chaos. They had no idea what was going to happen. The manager and the coach got fired. Like, there was all of a sudden no one directing the ship. You know, they could at least say this person's doing this. Well, at least we know that person's in charge. You know, that there was no one for a moment. There was no one. You know, Bruce Boudreau comes in, he's running practice, but like, Bruce wasn't hired to sort of represent the organization. And Stan has sort of said Stan's going to, you know, I mean, obviously it was paraded out in a way that I think those of us in hindsight and observer were just like, that wasn't fair to him.
Yeah.
But he's never going to tell you.
He handled it with aplomb. Yeah.
And he handled it with aplomb, and he did his job. And Besser, you know, and we heard about him coming, making the speech of what it means to be a Canuck and all this stuff. And that Besser highlight that 2 years later stood out to me. And those guys, you know, none of those guys had ever seen Stan play hockey, right? But they all knew that he was the rock in the midst of everything, always, constantly. And so if you are looking internally, if you say this person was the most important person for 45 years, there is no arguing with that. You go back, look at all the stars that have come through. We mentioned Lynn, we mentioned Bure, Sedin's, obviously there's been all these Naslin, there's been all these peaks, right? Those are the retired numbers. Luongo, like, should be there, whatever. But there's all these great peaks. But the guy that's been near the summit all the way through has been Stan Smyl.
Yeah, great stuff, Patrick. One thing, we don't have time, we got to end it here, but I did love the reference because you brought up McKeechee. It is long gone, Severin's, which you referenced in your piece, which was a very big celebrity sort of hangout in the day, where Stan met Jennifer when she was a waitress there.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, John McKeechee has lots of Severin's stories to play.
Oh
Maybe we'll get him on as a guest and get some of those. Thanks to you, Patrick. People should go read your Stan Smyl story, all the other stuff we produce. Sign up for Canuck Report email newsletter, which will bring you everything that we do, videos, any other format that we write, other stuff we publish. Your weekly mailbag all goes out, delivered to your inbox if you get on there. Thanks to Paragon BC or paragonroofingbc.com. That's where you can go for all your roofing needs. Thank you, everyone, and we will talk to you again next week.